This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Coming up on This Week in Agribusiness, agricultural policymakers return to Washington at the end of the congressional recess. Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us here for This Week in Agribusiness. I'm Mike Pearson in the studio this week after a fantastic time last week at the Farm Progress Show in Decatur, Illinois. It was great weather all 3 days, perhaps a record-breaking crowd at the Farm Progress Show this past year, and all of those farmers in one place attracted politicians. A number of ag policy folks were on hand to share their insights about what's ahead in Washington, D.C., including America's Secretary of Agriculture. Joining us now is Josh Baitke, policy editor with Farm Progress. And Josh, thanks for taking the time to talk with us this week.
Hey, good to be here, Mike.
Let's talk about Secretary of Agriculture Tom Vilsack's visit to the Farm Progress Show. Josh, he was there to make an announcement, wasn't he?
Yeah, he announced approximately $266 million and I want to say over 1,300 renewable energy projects. It's been a theme this year about him and the Biden administration have been working to give these incentives for producers to find alternate streams of revenue, and it's particularly aimed at small and medium-sized producers, and it seemed to be received well at the crowd there.
It was interesting to watch him. He was using a whiteboard to try to illustrate what the Biden administration's plan was, wasn't he?
Yeah, one of the themes he's really been focusing on lately is, I believe the latest statistics were only 7.5% of all farms account for more than 89% of agricultural revenue from farms and ranches. So what the administration has been trying to do is incentivize these programs like sustainable aviation fuel, organic products, renewable energy, and help producers get these alternative revenue streams so that they can stay in business and compete against these larger producers.
Absolutely. And of course, they're trying to work some of these programs into the Farm Bill negotiations. Josh, those are going to be heating up again as we get into September. And I understand there are still some groups out there, particularly connected to agriculture, who are submitting their wish lists for the Farm Bill. I understand governors recently did that. Is that right?
Yeah, the National Governors Association sent a letter in on Monday, kind of spelling out all the things that they want to prioritize for their states. And, it's just another in a long line of, throughout the summer, you've had pretty much every commodity group, various trade associations, environmental groups, everybody just trying to get their priorities into the bill as, Congress gets back to work and, considers everything to put in this massive bill.
And so that's the question. Josh, Congress is coming back there. August recess has ended. September has started. The Farm Bill expires on September 31st. Of course, that's vitally important to agriculture. But in Washington, D.C., they've got a lot of other things on the plate. Can you fill us in a little bit on what to expect this month now that Congress is headed back into D.C.?
Yeah, well, unfortunately, I think what you're going to see is the Farm Bill is going to take a back seat for a little bit. The Senate got back this week. The House returns next Monday. And when they get back, they're going to be facing a September 30th deadline. I believe there's 12 separate funding packages that all expire. So the budget battle is going to be heating up, and if they don't pass something before September 30th, we may be looking at a government shutdown. And, the real issue here is in the House. Obviously we have Democratic president, Democratic Senate, although with a very small majority. And then you have Republicans in charge of the House with a pretty slim majority. Now, some on the so-called Freedom Caucus, some of the further right representatives have come out and said they're not going to support a budget bill that doesn't include significant cuts, spending cuts. And, we saw this in June when we had the debt ceiling debate. They were able to get some concessions on SNAP, nutrition funding, as far as age requirements and work requirements and some other administrative things. And there was some thought that might be the end of the battle over nutrition funding. And now, a few of these representatives come back and said, no, we're expecting more. So it leaves Speaker McCarthy in a pretty difficult position. He can give them some of the things they want in the bill, but those will obviously fail in the House or the Senate. He could pass a bill with Democrat support, but there's kind of an unwritten rule in Washington that he's not going to bring a bill to the floor if it doesn't enjoy majority of support from Republicans. And if you recall back in January when he was, the multiple votes for becoming speaker, he's kind of on shaky ground here. So if he were to get pass the bill with a majority of Democrats, it's unclear if he would actually remain speaker. So not a whole lot of good choices there. But unfortunately, until this budget battle works itself out, we're probably not going to see much progress on the farm bill. I think the expectation is, there's going to be there's a lot of momentum pushing for some stopgap spending bills and maybe take this through to November, December, depending on which version passes. But there's a lot of things up in the air and a lot of things unrelated to agriculture that are going to affect the ability of the Farm Bill to get passed.
There certainly are. It's Farm Bill plus so much more coming in Washington. And folks, if you are going to be at Husker Harvest Days in Grand Island, Nebraska next week, stop by the main booth. Josh will be on stage at 10 o'clock during the Futures Alert, filling folks in on what's coming in the world of policy. Josh Baitke, Farm Progress Policy Editor, thanks for joining us this week.
Thanks a lot, Mike. I appreciate it.
This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. The Firestone Ag Dealer Network offers you the support, inventory, and resources you need. Visit firestoneag.com to find your local certified dealer. And it's time to talk markets. This past week was a shorter marketing week with Monday and markets closed due to Labor Day holiday. There's also some heat and dryness back in the forecast. Joining us now is Walter Kunish, Senior Commodity Strategist with Hilltop Securities. And Walter, looks like the markets are keeping an eye on the weather again, aren't they?
Absolutely. Good to be back. And thanks for having me from my kitchen today. The rip-roaring heat that's kind of moved throughout the Midwest, I think, has given them, these markets, soybean markets in particular, but corn, we're also seeing this too, concerns about where the USDA is going to print their yields in the WASDE report next week.
Well, and that's the big question. That report comes out on Tuesday, the World Agricultural Supply and Demand Estimates. And Walter, where do you think the USDA is going to come in relative to the trade estimates?
We believe on the corn piece, corn yields that the USDA could lower those by about a bushel and a half. On the soybean side, we anticipate that the government could lower their yield objective down by half a bushel. And I think if they do make those adjustments to accommodate for the late planting with corn, the acute dryness and heat that the key growing areas in the Midwest have experienced recently, I think the markets are starting to price that in, but that will honestly change the dynamics of the ending stocks number and the balance sheets for this year.
As you look at how those ending stocks numbers could change, of course, we've got production as a major component, but demand is the other side. Walter, we've seen corn exports suffer this year. Do you think the USDA will be accounting for that in this next one?
We thought that the USDA may increase the U.S. corn export figure pending the lack of exports out of Ukraine due to continued Russian interference in that part of the country. So right now, we're still optimistic that the USDA will increase the exports by maybe 150 million bushels. On the soybean side, I think if we continue to kind of contract the yield numbers, given the strong domestic demand, at least for crushing on the biodiesel, we believe that soybeans are probably meant to be rationed, and we may see a lowering in the export figure.
Okay, all right, that could come down the line. Walter, on the corn side here, as you're looking at this December corn crop for producers who maybe don't have anything marketed, are you looking to hedge ahead of this report, or should we let it ride?
That is a tough one. I think it depends what local basis looks like, what the position of those farmers are. We had been actively advising, our farm producing clients to hedge months ago, sort of fearing the scenario we're seeing there right now. That scenario has been a 2.2 billion bushel carryout, which has led to those pricing pressures. But ultimately, we are advising our clients that still have, some corn to market to look for price, to talk to their advisors, assess what's going on in the market, and when they do see those rallies, to make some prudent decisions.
That makes sense. Walter, on the basis front on corn side, are we seeing weakness as harvest approaches?
We're seeing weakness kind of across the board. Certainly some of it is harvest driven, but also some of it is driven by, once again, low river levels on the Mississippi. We're starting to see FOB export prices for corn out of the New Orleans Gulf start to strengthen, move higher. U.S. corn against Brazil has become uncompetitive in the global markets yet again, and we do believe that basis pressures for upriver can start to weaken if there's further dryness, but also too, certainly interior, we would expect to see possibly a moderate dip in basis depending upon what production looks like in a certain region.
All right, we'll be watching for that as those combines start to run. And when we return, we'll talk about what's moving in the wheat market here in the futures. We're talking with Walter Kunish, Senior Commodity Strategist with Hilltop Securities. This portion of This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Firestone Ag. Harvey Firestone invented the first pneumatic farm tire, forever changing what it means to farm hard. Visit firestoneag.com to learn more about this history and tire solutions for today. We're back talking markets with Walter Kunish, Chief Commodity Strategist with Hilltop Securities. Walter, we were talking about what's moving in the corn market, looking ahead to the WASDE on the soybean side. My question to you is on the wheat market. We've got this Black Sea grain initiative back in the news somewhat. Where does wheat go from here?
Oh, wheat. Oh, wheat. Poor wheat. What happened recently over in Ukraine has been just terrible for the people over there, and specifically the countries that depend and rely on Ukrainian wheat throughout the Middle East and the northern part of Africa. Vladimir Putin again kind of walked away from the initial framework that was set up to reestablish kind of a safe passage of Ukrainian vessels that have been exporting agricultural products through the Black Sea. We've seen some more drone attacks by Ukraine inside of Russia. We've also seen some more military activity by Russia against Ukrainian agricultural assets. And again, what's interesting to us is that the U.S. balance sheets for hard wheat are tight. We know that. But the futures markets are just not responding to these political pressures there. We do believe at some point, Russia is selling a lot of wheat right now. Some of the Ukraine crop is making its way out through Romania, but we are optimistic on the price trajectory of wheat because we believe that domestic and global fundamentals are tight.
All right, so at the end of the day, supply is the name of the game, and they are still tight. Speaking of tight supply, Walter, this whole year we have been talking about the tight supply in the cattle complex, driving record and near record values most of this summer. It seems like buyers have moved back into live cattle this past week. What's happened there?
Yeah, we look at the price action in the futures markets yesterday. Live cattle futures were up over $2 per hundredweight, and what we're seeing is kind of some restocking right now after Labor Day. But what we're also seeing is just an acute supply shortage of feeder cattle, and we're not seeing any signs that liquidation of the breeding herd or heifers is stopping. So I think what we're seeing now is some of these temperatures will eventually start to cool down in the southwestern population centers as well as northeast population centers. The economy is strong, and with that strong economy and cooling temperatures, we do expect to see a rebound in grilling demand, which will, hopefully support, live cattle prices.
Walter, as you take a look at this cattle market, either feeder or live cattle, of course, these futures contracts are up in some rarefied territory. Do you have a guess as to how far these things could start to move higher as we get through the rest of this year?
We do have some price projections for, looking out on both the feeder and the live curves. A lot of that is dependent upon, where, right now on current supplies, current beef supplies. But also, too, we're kind of optimistic that the Southwest region will start to experience some rain. We haven't seen that yet. But when we do, we expect those upstream cow-calf producers to continue to retain heifers. Our price projection on feeder cattle, we see November and January feeder cattle possibly trading in a $2.89 to $3 range. On the live cattle side, during that same time period for the December and February contracts, we have our pricing target or our estimate for around 195 to the 199 range.
$199, so $200 almost fat cattle and potentially $300 feeder cattle. Walter, did I get that correct?
Yes. I mean, again, we're just seeing, just continuously tight supplies, and tight supplies with, when demand is pretty strong, equates to higher prices.
It certainly does, folks. Keep an eye on those markets. Those moves could be coming later in this year, but of course, we'll have to continue to watch the broader markets to see if that consumer has the strength they're going to need. Folks, we've been talking this week with Walter Kunish, Chief Commodity Strategist with Hilltop Securities. And Walter, as always, thank you so much for joining us here on This Week in Agribusiness.
Have a good weekend.
Colby Ag Tech is brought to you by Copperhead Ag Products. Visit copperheadag.com for more information. I caught little glimpses of Chad Colby at the Farm Progress Show last week in Decatur. He was running around getting drone videos and camera shots of all the new technology, and he's got a breakdown for us today.
Over the years, I've liked to kind of categorize technology about two ways. One is kind of the practical application, and the second is disruptive. And at the recent Farm Progress Show, I can tell you there was a lot of extremely disruptive technology. Some of it's been on display for years, like you can see right here. This is Raven's cart automation. Now, if you recall, it was just a few years ago, this was a demo only. This demo now is working demo in front of a crowd, and it's available for purchase. Again, great technology that's been refined to be in the commonplace. And what about NextStat? This machine always had eyes on it at the entire show for obvious reasons. When you look at this machine, it's completely unorthodox. Disruptive? Absolutely. It was interesting for me because when the show was over, I watched them fold this machine up. In a matter of moments, he was gone. This gentleman right here is running the machine by remote control just to make sure he gets it out of there safely because it is so large. But once he pulled out on the road, he lowered the cab, jumped in it. In a matter of moments, he was gone. You know, it's interesting. If you go out to farmprogress.com and read some of the comments from the editors, there's a lot of technology there that always takes a while before it becomes mainstay or practical. Even things like drones, it's been around well over 10 years. We've been talking about sprayer drones for several years. This year, I noticed a lot more people looking at that. And what about Case IH? They rolled out their first electric tractor, a 65-horse farmall tractor. And get this, with a 4-hour runtime, it can charge back to 80% in less than an hour. It has all kinds of very neat features, a follow me mode, all kinds of stuff. Very interesting, extremely disruptive. And Mike, next week, we get the next launch of Apple technology, which of course includes the next iPhone. And the rumors are swirling about maybe some new battery technology, certainly faster, better camera, but maybe a big leap this time. And of course, we're getting rid of the lightning plug. That's pretty certain. It'll be an interesting week, and I'm looking forward to it. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Chad Colby.
Thank you, Chad. And folks, stay with us. Later in the program, we meet a dairyman with a unique herd.
Closed captioning for This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Pentair Hypro, a global leader in innovative spray technology for farmers for over 75 years.
Welcome back to This Week in Agribusiness. Our intrepid correspondent from the Dakotas, Al Gustin, has had a busy summer covering events that matter to farmers up in the Great Plains, and he's taking a look at issues relating to sustainability. Importantly, how well can this soil store the carbon that the industry would like to see stored in there? Well, one way we can determine that is through the use of soil pits. Al recently had a chance to go out and explore a soil pit in North Dakota, and he filed this story.
Soil pits, like this one at USDA's Northern Great Plains Research Lab, are not a new concept. For decades, scientists have used them to learn things they can't learn from traditional soil sampling.
Like changes in color, structural properties that are really important for moving water or retaining water throughout the profile.
As old as soil science, but as timely as today's efforts towards sequestering more carbon in the soil.
Carbon and roots that get deep in the profile are less likely to be mineralized and return back to the atmosphere as CO2. You begin to sequester carbon, you're going to be able to start to see some changes in the structural properties.
Changes that become visible here in the pit. Liebig says conventional farming practices have, over time, resulted in less carbon in the soil. Strategies that can increase soil carbon, he said, include reducing soil disturbance, maintaining soil cover, and increasing the duration of living roots.
We've got roots all the way down here, 20 inches.
The crops that are grown can make a big difference. In this case, the pit was dug into the edge of a field of corn, interseeded with a cover crop, part of a 3-year crop rotation that also includes wheat and soybean.
Done some work with intermediate wheatgrass and switchgrass, and their influence through their roots to be able to increase carbon in throughout the soil profile is quite significant.
There is, he says, something called soil memory.
You know, our agricultural land, it archives information about what our management has done to it in the past.
That's why they dig soil pits.
So the memory of the soil can come out and share its own narrative.
For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Al Gustin.
Thanks, Al. As carbon sequestration efforts continue across rural America, getting accurate assessments will be essential, and soil pits certainly seem like a good way to do that. That pit was up in Mandan, North Dakota, on the grounds of the Northern Great Plains Research Lab. And of course, the importance of soil health is always measured when those combines run, and we checked the yield monitor. And while he was up in North Dakota, Al had a chance to ride along with one of the entrants in the National Wheat Yield Contest.
This is an exceptional field of spring wheat. Irregularly shaped by the river it borders, the field is highly productive, a good choice for a wheat yield contest. In fact, this field did very well in the contest several years ago.
We start at the beginning of the season, pick the fields that we think are going to be the ones we want.
Do they apply more inputs to those fields?
Yes, on some of them we did, absolutely. We just wanted to see if we could push some of these yields a little bit higher.
Greg Messer has 3 sons. They're all agronomists, and they're big into variable rate technology on fertilizer and chemical application, even plant populations.
Better soils, we want to up the population a little bit. The lighter soils, we want to reduce the population.
This is the 4th year the Messers have been in the National Yield Contest. It's the 8th year for the contest run by the National Wheat Foundation.
And we want to encourage people to try new things with their wheat. Be innovative, try some things out, and then enter the contest.
It is a yield contest, the most bushels per acre. But farmers and wheat industry leaders will tell you that in the case of wheat, you need more than yield, you need quality too.
The genetics that we have and the varieties that we have, public and private, really, we can do both.
We want to keep the quality there. In fact, last year, our quality, we were weighing over 64 to 65 pounds on spring wheat, and we were still 14.5 to 15 protein. So that tells you we're not losing quality. The last 2 years we've wanted on good quality wheat, really good quality wheat. Yeah.
Last year, a new quality component was added to the national contest. Within this field, the Messers selected several plots. A disinterested third party monitored as the plots were measured. The entire process had to be certified from here to the local elevator. You could sense the anticipation as Greg's son Travis steered the combine into that first plot, which was measured at just under 2 acres. And he wondered as he drove to what extent the extra inputs had made a difference. Checking the yield monitor, he knew that abundant rainfall this summer had been a critical component. The monitor showed that despite all the variable rate technology, the yield still varied from one area to the next. The spring wheat from that first plot, non-irrigated, certified at the elevator, was 62 pounds, 13.5% protein, and just over 119 bushels per acre. USDA expects the nation's spring wheat crop this year to average 42. The Messers won't know how they fared in the contest this year until all the farmers entered have completed their harvest and the results are compared. Regardless, the Messers will apply what they've learned to the rest of their farm. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Al Gustin.
Thanks, Al. We'll be watching for those final yields to be posted later on this year for the National Wheat Yield Contest. But if you're thinking about next year, maybe you want to throw your hat in the ring, the rules are pretty simple. You can visit wheatfoundation.org for all the contest rules. Basically, you got to be 14 years old or older, a member of a state wheat growing association, and wheat will be divided into 2 subcategories, winter or spring, so you can compete in the one that fits best for your operation. Learn more at wheatfoundation.org. And folks, stay with us. We've got a lot more coming up on This Week in Agribusiness. We'll be revisiting some of the highlights of the Farm Progress Show, and we'll be learning about a dairy that's milking some interesting animals.
This Week in Agribusiness, serving America's most essential industry, is brought to you by Case IH.
Thanks for joining us for This Week in Agribusiness. There is going to be a lot of talk about the technology that was on display at the Farm Progress Show, but one of the other reasons that it's worth attending is getting caught up with growers who are involved in other aspects of our industry. Max had the chance to check in with our friends at the United Soybean Board, and he spoke with Steve Reinhardt about what that group is working on.
One of the folks we had the chance to catch up with at the Farm Progress Show is Steve Reinhardt from Ohio. Steve is vice chair of the United Soybean Board. Welcome to the Farm Progress Show, sir.
Well, thanks, Max.
How do your beans look in your part of the Buckeye State?
Don't look, too bad. We've got some really good-looking beans, and we got a few that are maybe not quite there, but we'll have an average crop, I'm pretty sure, in our neck of the woods.
Everybody who's been to the fields, seems like everybody has talked about variability. Is that the case in your part of the woods?
Yep, and this year, if you were a person that did a conventional tillage program, you have some pretty good-looking beans, and the conservation practices maybe took a little bit of a hit this year.
What is the whole bean campaign that the United Soybean Board is involved in?
Well, what we're trying to do is just let everybody know what we're doing with the whole soybean, and that involves the meal that we're using in different products, whether it be feeding livestock, which is our biggest customer. The poultry and the pork are the two big consumers of meal. We do have some that goes into human consumption as well, but we have going into new things too, like wood adhesives and just a lot of variable new activities that we're continuing to expand on. And then on the oil side, we're looking at doing a couple different things, and one is food security there, as well as biofuels, energy, sustainable energy, biofuels, rubber in the Goodyear tires. There's just a lot of new projects there we're doing with oil as well. So it's talking about the whole soybean.
Am I correct that Goodyear is talking about taking out all of the petroleum in their tires and then replacing it with soybean oil? Is that right?
Yeah, replacing it with soybean oil, and I think they had a goal at one time like at 2040, so we're not talking too many years down the road, and we've actually got a new investment with them working on another aspect of that transition.
You're always zeroing in on new technologies, I know, but you help producers on the production side as well, do you not? Looking for ways to help the grower who pays the bill in that way?
Yep, we have a lot of different investments with universities around the country, and different collaboratives with even within those universities where they're working with each other and trying to come up with different, a better disease package, maybe a better nutrient package that farmers can use to enhance the livestock production. So there are a lot of different things we're working on, investing in that soybean so we can get a better return back to the farmer.
Through the years, I've been impressed with all the folks who serve on the United Soybean Board. They take a tremendous interest in what's going on, how the money is spent, and how it can best be spent for the producers. Steve, I congratulate you and your colleagues in that.
Well, thank you, Max. It takes a lot of time, but it's really rewarding to be able to see how these investments get put to use, and then to see them actually turn into products then at the end of the cycle.
Take care. Hope you have a great harvest.
Thanks, you too.
Steve Reinhardt from Bucyrus, Ohio, Vice Chair of the United Soybean Board.
Thanks, Max, and thanks, Steve. And of course, a big thank you to soybean growers for helping the Farm Progress Show pave that ground under the varied industries tent in both Decatur and Boone. Hard surface, courtesy of soybeans. You can learn more at unitedsoybean.org.
Greg Solier now brings us his farm weather forecast for the week ahead, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
Well, it's time to take a look at the sky with meteorologist Greg Solier. Greg, looking out across the country in the Pacific Northwest, what do you anticipate this week?
Well, not quite the degree of rain that they had there last week. It helped to ease the fire situation and some element of dryness and drought, but certainly a long way to go. This week it's a little more ridging up aloft, not the heat wave weather pattern that we saw across the heartland and points out of the east, but still some very warm weather pushing the back forward to maturity. Maybe some element of the last of winter wheat harvest as well into Washington State. Cool air lobed across Big Sky country, across Montana. Boy, it's haves and have-nots roughly on this line northward, north of Missouri. That's where the worst of the dryness and drought and the smoke situation continues on. Farther south, it's been relatively okay with moisture in mind. We do get a frontal boundary that kind of zips in into the northern plains. Yeah, there's been a nice return to more seasonal, more typical, more easier to take temperatures in the short term across the northern and central plains. And again, scant moisture in the Pacific Northwest with that one boundary here, another one coming ashore, so nothing really to write home about. Very quiet weather picture into the northwestern reaches of the country for this week. Same generally applying to the southwestern sections of the nation. The heat has retrograded back into the desert southwest, and the core of the heat very much limited into the desert southwest. And boy, the monsoon easing situation is good news for areas around Vegas that had flooding and parts of the Intermountain West as well. Pretty quiet weather pattern as well back into the northern and central plains. This is more or less seasonal heat returning to parts of Kansas and Oklahoma. We're just getting going on winter wheat planting, about 1% complete into parts of Colorado and the southern plains. Again, not much going on over the desert southwest. Next to deal on the monsoon setup here. Quiet through the valleys of California. The Pacific Basin for now is quiet. Cooler air once again on the move across sections of the northern and central plains. So again, not much going on. Very easygoing weather pattern in the southwest for this week.
Well, Greg, across the central plains, we've got those crops trying to get towards harvest. What's this next week outlook look like?
And we've seen some element of harvest, but primarily into the western corn belt. That's been really where the core of the heat over the past few weeks has played on out. And there will be some opportunities the week wears on here for harvest into the western complex. I think about 15 to 20, maybe 22% of the corn is mature, a little lesser on the bean side. Again, mostly western complex. Another push of some cooler, delightful, a hint of early autumn type air into the northern plains. And we'll get some shower activity early in the week for sections of the eastern through southern corn belt. That weather system moves on through. There'll be an advancing front that actually stalls out here because the Atlantic basin's getting busy. We'll talk about that with the next system out towards the Black Hills. And again, a relatively easy to take weather pattern with outdoor work and early harvest in mind across the corn belt back into the northern and central plains, as well as for winter wheat planting operations for this week. The heat has been unrelenting across the Lone Star State. What's it been? 3.5 months worth of triple digit readings, and you can see it out there in the back 40. The heat back into the Rio Grande. A couple of showers here across the southern sections of the plains. A weak disturbance in the core of the drought here through the central Gulf Coast area, generating a couple of showers and thunderstorms into the early portions of the week. We'll get some cooler, drier air to move into the northern sections of the winter wheat belt. Some shower activity for the western Gulf Coast. This weather system slowing on up, Mike, as again the Atlantic basin gets busy. We'll keep a close and careful eye on Lee as the week wears on.
Well, Greg, while we're here, take us through what else is anticipated along the eastern seaboard this next week.
Yeah, again, all weather eyes are really focused on Lee, but early in the week we do get a frontal boundary here for the northeast of New England, high pressure mid-Atlantic region. Here's the next weather system across the Corn Belt. Not much to speak of in anybody's rain gauge, and we do anticipate here the weeks to come probably a worsening again or a downward grade on some of the dryness and drought related issues across the eastern Corn Belt as the weeks wear on. This frontal boundary on the move, but stalls out. We think this is Lee. We know it's Lee, but where is it going to run to? Here, probably not going to get absorbed by the upper level winds, but there could be a pretty good lashing towards the weekend across coastal sections of New England northward. Cooler, drier air and a delightful outdoor work pattern for much of the Great Lakes region with some shower activity down towards the Ohio Valley. The Gulf of Mexico basin quiet. A couple of showers and thunderstorms scattered across the Gulf Coast. The worst of the drought here for Louisiana on westward through Texas. Wet weather pattern and very high humidity down through Florida. Here's this frontal boundary, and then we think here comes Lee with maybe the Outer Banks getting a couple of outer bands of shower activity and rain, and then a track northward and then northeastward across coastal sections of the mid-Atlantic region and the northeast. We'll keep you posted here as the week wears on.
Greg Solier is back with his extended farm weather forecast for the country, presented by Pivot BioProven 40. Predictable, productive, weatherproof. Turn to a better nitrogen. Turn to Pivot BioProven 40. Learn more at pivotbio.com.
We're back talking weather with meteorologist Greg Solier. And Greg, you highlighted some chances for precipitation this next week. Who's going to get what?
We think maybe the southern plains, the deep south, and ultimately the southeastern states here. And this is relatively good news here as the week wears on, with maybe an inch or two coming off some of the recent weekend rainfall for parts of the central and southern plains. Winter wheat planting just getting underway, about 1 to 2% complete. So this will be good news for germination. But again, ongoing dryness and drought big time. Oklahoma and Texas and down through Louisiana, where some of the storms will be severe. We're going to keep an eye on Florida with wet weather here, and we think while these rain amounts are certainly underdone based on no landfall from Lee, we think there may be a brush by here across maybe Cape Cod, maybe as far west as maybe D.C., and then out across areas of Nova Scotia and the western through northern Atlantic. But we'll keep you posted. This is going to be a big one here, lashing some parts of North America. Scattered activity in the southwest, widely scattered moisture in the Pacific northwestern reaches of the country. So, Mike, it's the central and southern winter wheat belt. Hip, hip, hooray for rain this week.
All right, Greg, looking out to the next week, September 18th. What's that temperature outlook there?
Well, kind of a hit of autumn and fall in the air as we clock in here on the 23rd. Kind of a late arriving fall season this year. And still a few degrees below average, but nothing to greatly impact the last of crop growth and maturity for the Corn Belt. Warmth over the deep south and southeastern portions of the country, Pacific Northwest, in between readings close to normal, the core of the cold, if you will, up towards the Canadian Prairie, the St. Lawrence River Valley on northward, where it's not unusual to have a whimper of frost this time of the year in the early September calendar. Great opportunity for outdoor work, winter wheat planting, and maybe getting the back 40 to maturity across the Corn Belt, back into the Plain States areas as well. Systems are going to be watched again over the southwest Atlantic, moving out across the northern Atlantic, the Pacific Basin that's quiet, but some good news with more moisture for Northern California and the Pacific Northwest.
The last full week of September. Greg, what does your temperature outlook show?
Again, that cool to cold lobe is not the way we see the fall season. Matter of fact, on next weekend's edition, I think we will have for you the fall outlook across North America. The cool air moving off to the north and east. Here's a pretty good warm ridge. It's still there despite the September calendar date here, almost October, across parts of the Plain States, and warmth over the southeastern sections of the country. Moisture-wise, parts of the Rio Grande, we're back to dry time and winding out of the monsoon season over the southwestern reaches of the country. Opportunity for crop maturity and harvest across sections of the Corn Belt, probably more so western reaches, a little above average over the eastern part of the country, and maybe a system beginning to brew up over the eastern Gulf of Mexico, so some wet weather in this part of the country and back on shore into the Pacific Northwest.
For that first full week in October, Greg, do we have any fall-like temperatures?
We certainly do not, and this is maybe a little snapshot. This is maybe a pretty good picture by and large, on average, of how we think fall and even early winter will play out with El Nino in control. We think, outside of some occasional cool and cold lobes, much of the time temperatures at or actually well above seasonal norms, and we'll go into the first full week of October with readings at almost late summer-like levels for much of the heartland to the east coast, a little sliver of cool weather in the Pacific Northwest. Meanwhile, plenty of opportunity. Yeah, we're going to worsen drought conditions as we're expecting, but plenty of opportunity for harvest with wet weather for the eastern states, Canadian Prairie, and the Pacific Northwest.
Next on This Week in Agribusiness, it's Max's Tractor Shed, spotlighting another great American tractor.
If you were at the colossal half-century of progress last month, it was one of the tractors that was hard to miss in that 100-tractor lineup celebrating the Farmall brand. It came from Tennessee. Max's Tractor Shed is brought to you by Mystic Lubricants. Mystic Lubricants producers are made to make it last. Well, near Nashville, Tennessee, Randy Woodward has a tractor you can't take just anywhere. It would be a little bit difficult to parade this one down the streets of town without trailering it. But Randy likes to get it out into the field, he told me. He likes to plow with it. And he was doing a little bit of demonstrating that tractor without the plow on it, but he likes to go to plow days. He said he's keeping his eyes open for a 4-disc plow, as he put it, wanting to really put that tractor to the test at a plow day. Randy Woodward shared with me that he likes shows where there are implements with the tractors. He likes plowing out there. Well, I agree with him. It's nice to see those implements behind the machines. Nothing quite like seeing these machines used the way they were intended. And thanks to Randy Woodward of Smyrna, Tennessee, we got to see the McCormick Deering 2236 at the half-century of progress last month. It's one of those tractors that really helped make that show memorable. Mark Stock was there. He helped make the half-century memorable, too. He checks in now with his weekly report from Big Iron Auctions.
Well, hello, Max. Last week at Farm Progress on our big Iron Sullivan Auctioneers lot was a 2023 Klaus Combine with 0 hours. It sold for $620,250, and it sure caught a lot of people's attention. We enjoyed visiting with a lot of people. And now this week, Max, we'll be in Grand Island, Nebraska at Husker Harvest Days. And boy, do we have a nice lineup of machinery that will sell in conjunction with the Husker Harvest Days Farm Show. We do have some great retirement sales this week. Vern Kelly is retiring. They live by Northfield, Minnesota. 53 items selling on their sale, including a John Deere 9650 combine, John Deere 4700 self-propelled sprayer. On Wednesday, September the 13th, 3,000 items will sell, Max, from 276 sellers all across the Midwest. On Thursday, September the 14th, a series of auctions will take place. Kurt and Gail Koning are retiring. They live by St. Charles, Minnesota, and they've got a John Deere collector tractor auction, folks. Plus, also on Thursday, September the 14th, is the Husker Harvest Days focused auction. Look forward to seeing everyone in Grand Island, Nebraska.
Our FFA Chapter Tribute is brought to you by Pioneer, developing new generations of seed innovations for new generations of farmers. Pioneer, what's next happens here. This week, we're getting to know the head of the Hawkeye State FFA. Holly Schmidt serves as FFA State President for the state of Iowa. And Holly, thanks for talking to us this week.
Yes, thank you for having me.
Tell us a little bit, if you would, about your ag background. Holly, what's agriculture like in St. Lucas, Iowa?
So I grew up on a dairy farm up in the northeast corner of our state. In that area, there's a lot of other dairy farmers, a lot of row crop. There's a couple beef operations as well. But growing up on a dairy farm, I got to help feed calves, milk with my dad at times, and just make sure things were running smoothly in our calf barn, but also on our steer lot. So that's something that I grew up doing. And across the state, swine is huge in Iowa. We're the #1 pork producing state. So we have a lot of diversity in Iowan agriculture.
We certainly do, and we see that reflected in the FFA groups across the state. Looking out over this year, Holly, what are you most excited about in your year of service to the FFA?
This year, I'm really excited to meet members from all across the state, up in my home area, but also in the western and southern parts of our state as well. This year, I'll be putting probably close to 18,000 miles on my vehicle, getting to travel all around the state, meet members, and hear their stories in agriculture.
Holly, what was it that made you want to be a part of leadership in the FFA?
So when I joined FFA my freshman year of high school, I wasn't very sold on it at first, but my older sister Hannah really encouraged me to be in it and kind of pushed me to kind of get more involved. And just seeing those leaders and other state officers, it really encouraged me to see the big impact that they were making and see that I could also make a big impact. So that kind of led me to the role I'm in today.
And of course, you've got a big year ahead of you as president of the Iowa FFA. No doubt a lot to learn, Holly. But as you look out longer term, do you hope to have a career in agriculture?
Yeah, so right now I'm a sophomore at Iowa State University and I'm studying agricultural education and event management. So I'd like to either be a high school ag teacher or plan events for an agricultural company.
Well, we wish you the best of luck, folks. That's Holly Schmidt, serving as president of the Iowa FFA this year. Holly, good luck to you.
Thank you so much.
Colorado is a very diverse state agriculturally, with its elevation changes and its differences in rainfall, and that means that row crop and animal ag producers there sometimes think outside the box. Before we go for this week, our friend Lori Boyer in Colorado sent us a story from the Eastern Plains about a dairyman who's no longer milking cows.
Yuma County is the #1 corn-producing county in the state of Colorado. But did you also know that it's home to a camel dairy? Hello everyone, I'm Lori Boyer coming to you just north of Ray, Colorado in extreme northeastern Colorado. And today I am excited to bring you the story of Camelot Dairy.
We just wanted to try to do something unique and different.
Unique and different it is. Based in Yuma County, Colorado, Camelot Dairy is a 30-head camel dairy operation, which includes the milking cows, babies, and a bull. With his background and growing up nearby on a dairy farm, owner Kyle Hendricks milks 6 to 7 cows a day, collecting an average of 4 to 5 gallons of milk per day. Once the milk is collected, he then stores it in holding tanks for 72 hours. The milk is then processed on farm with his pasteurizer.
High temp, short time. It runs 2 gallons of milk a minute. So all we have to do is hook up our hoses to the raw tank, and the milk feeds through the balance tank. It's got a heat plate exchanger here, and so it's constantly exchanging heat and cold. And when that milk comes out, the milk is already cooled to 50 degrees. And then we go into our finished tanks here, cool down to 40, and then bottle from there.
The milk then gets bottled and labeled, and it is stored in pint-sized bottles frozen because he says it is easier to ship that way, and it is shipped in styrofoam boxes with ice packs. The milk is good for up to 1 year. You may be wondering, who are their customers?
Mainly, we have a lot of children with food allergies that consume our milk. There's diabetics for natural insulin. There's natural insulin in the milk. And it's just an all-around good, healthy dairy option.
Camelot Dairy is a commercially licensed facility, which means the state of Colorado tests the pasteurizer and milk samples monthly. Hendricks says that camels are hardy and fairly easy keepers. They eat grain and hay and are out on pasture during the day in the summer months. In addition to the camel milk, he offers tours, hauls the camels to holiday nativity scenes and other special events for both photo opportunities and rides. For ordering and information, log on to CamelotDairy.com. For This Week in Agribusiness, I'm Lori Boyer.
Well, Lori, thanks for that story. It's great to see folks innovating in agriculture. Kyle Hendricks and Camelot Dairy, we wish you the best of luck going forward. Thank you, everyone, for joining us. If you will be out in the fields this week, do stay safe, stay hydrated with that warm weather, and be sure to join us next time right here for more This Week in Agribusiness.
This Week in Agribusiness is brought to you by Case IH. This Week in Agribusiness is produced by Omax Communication in association with 22 Creative Group. We invite you to visit us online at agbizweek.com.